All right, folks, welcome back. We're talking about the Securities and Exchange Commission and how wonderfully successful they've been in protecting American consumers and from sudden drops in the stock market. And it's been pretty crazy out there. We're talking about Joseph P. Kennedy, the father of Jack and Robert Kennedy and other Kennedy clan people. Edward Kennedy was first chair of the committee. They have great PR.
Yes, they have great PR.
Plus they're good businesses, I know.
Absolutely. And they say that. Sailor's about to move to the other side of the aisle.
Sorry, that's hungry I am.
Wait for my book, folks. We're writing the last chapter now. I did skip. We were short on some research, so I wrote chapter 21 was the last chapter. We were putting final touches on that, and we'll go back and write chapter 20, and then we're going to send it to Adam. So, and we do have a chapter on Jack Kennedy.
What's your book on?
It's called The Decline of America: 100 Years of Leadership Failures.
Wow.
Talks about Presidents Wilson through Obama and how they have let the country down despite a lot of us good people out here working our butts off to make America successful. And I think we're about to run our path here if we don't get some better leadership. And I don't just criticize the presidents, but also criticize the whole system in Washington in a lot of ways. But the book is written like a giant journal article, so every statement is supported for the whole book. That's why it takes so long to write it, because it's not just freehand, gee, look at how bad everything was. It's like, this is what happened here. It's a site, this is what happened. So it's a very tedious, so it's about a 270-page book, we think in that ballpark, and it is probably of that length, maybe 50 pages are just citations. But what we do is we do it APA 6, so you just have, you don't have the irritating footnotes, you just have a brief author and year in the text, and then all of the footnotes for all the chapters are at the very end of the book to make the book more readable. So you either read it, or if you're real into the sources, then you can read you can flip back and forth and look at where the sources were, or read the whole book, like a book, and then if you're curious about certain things, you'll have all the sources available to you.
So who did you write this book?
No, it's a solo effort. I have a research team that works for me, and because it's a controversial book, it's, we call it myth busting. It's including the Kennedy myths that we bust. Just so you know, and very good looking, we say that.
I mean, that's not all they were, but it's fine.
They're rich and good looking. I think that's pretty much.
They're smart, they're
Rich
well
and good looking.
educated.
They were smart.
Rich, good looking, educated at Harvard. We could opine about that one way or another. And but some kind of interesting thing. And I have to be careful.
But that's why you like the U.S., because we cannot have varying opinions and still be in the same class together, right?
We talk about diversity, and I make a big issue, especially in the last chapter about diversity, is that I don't think we credit America enough with diversity that we, I think, are successful. One of the reasons we're successful, in addition to the natural benefits of the country, are because of its a very diverse population. And what's interesting about that is if you study team dynamics, one of the things they found out is that if you want to get something done simply, easily, you have a homogeneous team. Because then they don't fight with each other, they just go do it together. If you want to create something new, you want a diverse team who will fight with each other, because that will push the envelope and make things more different. Because people don't sit there like morons and just nod their heads. They actually have an interaction. And so, but if you view America as a big team, which is probably a pretty fair example, I think that right now we have been successful in spite of our leadership for too long. And the concern expressed in my book is that if we don't change our expectations and how we do things, and I predict some, in chapter 21, I predict some interesting things. I think we're going to have a multi-party system in the future. I don't think we're going to be just Democrats and Republicans. I think this race pretty much did both major parties in, because the brand doesn't mean anything.
We need that because some views are,
They don't
you know,
really
some
fit.
people may have multiple views. Like I may agree with some things Republicans, you know, stand for, and I may agree with some things.
Exactly, and I think
important.
we're going to have much more divisions, and I don't think that's divisive in our society. I think right now it's kind of a limited dictatorship because you have to fit in over here, you have to fit in over here, you're nobody, and I don't think that's really what was really intended. And you know, the early elections in Washington were not Democrat or Republican. I mean, they mixed it up. The vice president didn't have to be the same party as the president, for instance. I mean, they really mixed it up a lot more. So anyway, we'll do some publicity. And actually, Tuesday of this coming week, we do a brown bag of the faculty presents. I'll be doing a presentation of just one chapter. Again, we're writing a whole book, so I'm going to present the chapter on Bill Clinton, and just to give people a flavor for the book.
Bill Clinton,
Well, I picked Clinton because it's such an interesting administration, a lot of discussion of it because of Hillary running for president. Oh, I loved him so much, yes, absolutely.
Is that open to students?
Love and admiration.
The brown bag?
As far as I know.
Yeah.
I think we're in Brazilian room, 12:30 to 2, and I've been asked to attend another meeting. Big surprise. So I'm going to do the second. We have two presenters. I'm going to do the presentation probably from 1:15 to 2 o'clock. So it'll be
limited
Tuesday,
seating
20.
or?
Oh no, it's a Brazilian room. We see 30 people in there. There's usually 10 or 12 people around there. I'd love to have more students in there. So maybe we'll get some more
You
people
should
in.
send out an email reminder just for those of us that can make it.
For people on campus,
Yeah. At least the class, that would be
Yeah,
nice.
the class, that's right.
At least the class.
Yeah, I'll love to.
I think that's a good idea. We haven't done that yet. Now that I'm working blackboard, I
There you
can
go.
send out announcements. Okay. So one of the things is that you can go after the SEC is the civil agency. The Department of Justice can criminally prosecute. Individual citizens who are hurt can file individual lawsuits. And of course, you know, all of that happened in Madoff. Madoff, Department of Justice, they put him in jail. The SEC goes in and prosecutes him on the other part, you know, civil charges, shuts down his organization, no longer has a listing license. And then individuals who are hurt file suit also. So you have the trifecta in just the one case, the Madoff case. And so again, the 34 Act is, we talk about insider trading, and we also talk about making financial reports accurate. 10Ks, most of us are familiar with 10Ks, and are mandated by the Act. And one of the things to keep in mind is that some of the biggest scandals of the early 2000s were companies deliberately manipulated their 10Ks to look better. Enron famously was trying to show that they made more money every quarter, even though they weren't. So they came up with this deal of having off-balance sheet companies that were actually loaning money. It's the exact opposite of what normally happens. Big companies sometimes set up small companies to do entrepreneurial ventures or experimental ventures, and those are funded. The money comes from the big corporation. Enron did the exact opposite. Set up small companies, given that they were in the shadow of Enron, banks and other institutions foolishly lended to them, even though they didn't have the real backing of Enron, or they didn't understand that Enron really wasn't good for the money. And so, but that's how it was happening. So, but the anticipation was to get the income to go up a little bit every time so they could keep this continuous string of increasing earnings to pump the stock. Stock never got to a particularly high dollar value. I think its peak was $60 or $65 a share, and it dropped to 20 cents. Yeah. Now, what's interesting about 20 cents is there's actually an article, a
So there's
professional.
not like a rock bottom?
Yeah, it's called zero. Yeah, but and this is the funny thing I was just going to say. Professional Journal article talks about the residual value of zero stocks. That the stock is carried at 20, I know this sounds funny, we went from 65 to 20 cents, but the fact that somebody would pay 20 cents for a stock that is absolutely worth nothing is interesting, and they've actually done a study on that, and I guess that if you still have the hard copy certificates, you could maybe peddle them and say, oh, I've got an Enron stock certificate here or something like that. Most of us don't have stock anymore. We have electronic indicators that somewhere there's some stock.
So at the end of everything, they were left with no assets?
Oh, the company was liquidated. Pieces went different places. For a short time, there was still an operating company, but basically it wasn't sustainable, and the brand was so badly damaged that even if you had a piece like the Enron trading floor, it had to go someplace else because nobody would want to do business with something still called Enron. But thousands of people lost their jobs, thousands and thousands of people lost their savings plan because so many of them had their money invested in company savings plan. Very sad situation.
And the effects on real estate were great a great deal here this
And what's that saying?
The effects on real estate.
Oh, it's a massive impact here in Houston, since they were based here, and a very sad situation. I still remember the Crooked E downtown, out in front of their main building.
My office was a couple blocks away from
Yeah.
my office, and we would see people, literally walking around with boxes and stuff. It was sad.
Right,
It was a sad
right,
time.
yeah, people crying. And it was interesting because since they controlled the building, I understand when I didn't personally see this, but I understand people would get in the elevator, and Ken Lay would do like personal deals, and there would be like your personalized YouTube video. You'd get in the elevator, and he'd tell you how great the company was doing that day, and all this stuff. I mean, they were drinking the old cliche about drinking the Kool-Aid. That's all that. Folks, just want to remind you the term proxy. I think everybody in this room knows what the word proxy means, where you allow somebody else to cast your vote. That's no big thrill. Insider trading liability, one of the best known parts of the 1934 Act, probably the most famous case of the recent past was the Martha Stewart case. Again, Martha did not go to jail for insider trading. She was interviewed by the FBI about insider trading because she was sleeping with the president of the company, and she, I believe, shorted the stock. I think a lot of people think she bought the stock. I think she shorted it because I think what she learned was that it was a drug company, and a key drug was not going to get FDA approval. So when you have that, you short the stock. You don't buy more. You wait and then buy it after it drops. But in any event, what happened is that she actually went to jail for lying to the FBI, not for insider trading. Now, her boyfriend who told her the story, my understanding is he went to jail. So, kind of interesting deal. But we had a big case recently where somebody was accused of massive manipulation in the market to just totally do insider trading, over and over again. And so there's definitely some issues with that. And it's interesting because insider trading is not illegal in Germany, I am told. And so, it's expected that people are going to talk about stuff. So the real issue is who's an insider. The other point I want you to keep in mind is materiality. You have to learn information that's really material from someone who's an insider. If you're just a good researcher and you know things about a company, and the best example of this, folks, is the recent movie The Big Short with, I think, Christian Bale is the lead actor in that. And that's the name of the movie, The Big Short. What happens is these guys don't have inside information. They are just good researchers. And he basically decided that the whole subprime mortgage thing was junk, and he's looking at what's in the actual securities. The mortgages are being packaged and floated, and mortgages historically have been very conservative investments. They're safe bets. So for some reason, he just looks. He says, well, let me see what's in here. He says, it's junk. It's just junk. It's not traditional mortgages as we know them, where people are putting down 10 and 20%. These are like no money down and no credit check, and a lot of bad stuff was being put in these baskets of securities. So he said, given the massive amount of these that's in the marketplace, there's a big crash coming. So the big short means what they did is they shorted the mortgage market and made millions and millions of dollars. And in fact, the plot kind of ties in, they could have made even more, except people who were backing them didn't really believe that they were that good that they could pick a short that big. So a very, very interesting presentation. It's kind of gross because the character that Christian Bale plays, the lead character, is presented as a very unsavory character himself. Not in terms of his integrity, but in terms of his personal habits. He's not a very nice, you don't want him as your roommate, let's just put it that way.
In the book, you learned that he has Asperger's.
Yes.
You're really
High functioning. High functioning. Yeah, high functioning, but yeah, socials.
Yeah, no social, no social.
That's what they sound like.
Yeah, pretty much.
Now we want to mention two recent pieces of legislation, one in the news a lot in the last few weeks. Sarbanes-Oxley. Sarbanes-Oxley is passed in 2001, 2002 as a response to Enron, Arthur Andersen, and another half dozen or so major stock scandals from the early 2000s, Tyco, Adelphia, WorldCom, HealthSouth, some of the other big scandals that all hit in the same time period, and many of them similar deals where the profits of the company are being misrepresented, the stocks are going up, people are playing with the stock in-house, some of the executives are, a number of these people go to prison as a result. In any event, Sarbanes-Oxley, I have a slide presentation for you. We do not have time to walk through it in class. The reason I mention it to you, if you have an interest in this area beyond just the test, you might want to take a look at it. Now remember folks, over time you lose access to certain course material. If you're interested in that, download the slides to your computer. Don't leave them on Blackboard, okay? So good rule of thumb, if you're interested, there is this custom slide presentation based on the American Institute of CPA's analysis of the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, turned it into a slideshow, so it's kind of easy to read. The other piece that we have is the Dodd-Frank Act of 2010. This act, along with the Affordable Care Act, reportedly on the chopping block. I must admit, and without any political interest at all, that I am a staunch criticizer of the Dodd-Frank Act. I think it is an anti-consumer act. I think it was designed to make some people in Washington feel good. It increases the cost of lending. It makes things more difficult for the normal consumer. I can't think of anything about it that really is better.
What was the intent of the act?
The alleged intent of the act was to get Barney Frank someplace, since he finally had run out of time in Congress. And so he has his name on an act that's talked about a great deal until it's repealed. And it doesn't really help much of anything. It was supposed to be the big consumer act. Now, a few weeks ago, kind of the nail in the coffin for Dodd-Frank, doesn't even have to wait to be repealed. The Consumer Financial Protection Board, CFPB, which was created by Dodd-Frank, was found unconstitutional. That's the big dog. That's like, no, you can't really fix unconstitutional. So, because of the way it was administered, and it's a little complex to get into, but basically it's a one-person show, and they do not report direct to the president. He said you can't do that. You have to have multiple boards, like the National Labor Relations Board, again, not a cabinet agency, headed by a 5-person board. SEC, multiple-person board. Dodd-Frank, CFPB, 1 person, and not reporting through cabinet, which means the president. They don't serve at the luxury of the president. Got a problem. So, very interesting outcome. A financial institution was tagged up for about $106 million or something, and they went in and they just went straight for the jugular. They just said, you don't even exist, you don't have the authority, you weren't set up properly. And remember what we talked about enabling statutes under the Administrative Procedures Act. Same idea. You go for, how did you get here? How did you even think that you had the authority to do something to me? Where did your authority come from? turn it 180 degrees. So interesting outcome.
But
So,
it was created by Congress.
well, yeah, the law was created by Congress, but then the organization wasn't set up correctly.
But that was the one that was, it's 1,200 pages, we only have 24 hours. Even if you read it and had two lawyers to explain it, you still wouldn't understand it, so we
Yeah.
passed it anyways.
Yeah, I believe that Nancy Pelosi said that about that and the Affordable Care Act both, yeah. Both similar bills in terms of length and complexity. And this is, it's interesting because I address this in my book. We talk about the explanation for not having term limits on Congress is everything's so complicated that you have to be in Congress for a long time to figure out what's going on. My answer is balderdash. What we need to do is making money and doing taxes and stuff. It ain't that complex, folks. You tax people on what they make or you tax people on what they buy. Yep, one or the other, and then you just do it. You don't need, it's the thousands of pages of regulations that tell you who's zooming who. It's not complicated. But it's interesting because if you make it complicated, you can say, well, I need a lifetime appointment to Washington because this stuff's so complicated. Well, how did it get complicated? Well, we came up with it because we had a bunch of lobbyists write the bill last year, and then we had a new set of lobbyists write the bill this year, and we had another set of lobbyists write the bill next year. No, I don't think so. Yeah, no. So anyway, Jobs Act of 2012, the non-creation of Jobs Act of 2012. Yeah, another massive failure. $780 billion non-stimulus, followed by a $780 billion bailout of the auto companies that both still went through bankruptcy, followed by this dud. Yeah, really exciting.